Nearly half of Canadians say they're losing sleep over retirement, and they're right to be worried. The truth is, most Canadians won't be able to afford to retire, let alone build real wealth. Welcome to the Truth About Real Estate Investing show for Canadians. I'm Erwin Cito, real estate investor in Canada and the US, Ontario realtor, and I help Canadians build a portfolio of managed US rental properties via Share. I'm on a mission to become the Google Maps for hardworking Canadians seeking financial freedom, so you can skip the guesswork and follow a proven route to wealth. Since 2010, I've helped over 350 investors transact nearly $500 million worth of income properties, not just real estate. And many are now financially free or have made seven figures thanks to the very investments we helped coach them to buy. This is not through luck, but rather through repeatable, data-driven systems that actually work. This podcast is where we expose the scams, break down the real numbers, including the losses, and share them honest strategies to help you build real, lasting wealth. If you're serious about taking control of your financial future, make sure you follow and subscribe to this show. On this episode of The Truth About Real Estate Investing for Canadians, we're joined by Rodney Wilts, a visionary real estate developer who's proving that profitability, sustainability, and social impact can coexist. Rodney began his career as an environmental lawyer before making a bold pivot into real estate development. He is founding partner of Thea Partners, a development firm known for tackling high complexity, high impact projects like Zibi, the transformative 34-acre zero carbon mixed use community built on a former contaminated industrial site. Nobody wanted this land. 34 acres of it, straddling the Ottawa River. So for more complexity, it straddles a body of water between Ontario and Quebec. Zibi has earned recognition on a global scale, winning awards for public consultation and best master plans across Ontario, Canada, North America, and even the world. Rodney's projects go beyond brick and mortar. He's helping solve Canada's housing crisis by delivering strong returns through ethical, environmentally friendly, and socially inclusive housing, including partnerships with Indigenous housing providers and faith-based organizations like First Unitarian of Ottawa. One of his current projects is building 2 new rental towers, one market rate, one not-for-profit, right at the LRT station in Ottawa. That's light rail transit. Think streetcars. If you want to learn how to build a double-digit IRR is what sophisticated investors use to calculate return on investment that's time adjusted, while cleaning up contaminated land, embracing ESG, environmental, social governance, and creating a real social impact, this episode is for you. Now, here's just a quick note from my lawyers before we get started. This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not constitute legal, financial, or investment advice. I'm not your lawyer. I'm not your accountant. Go marry your own. I'm just joking. And neither is my guest. He is a lawyer, but he's not your lawyer. So please do your own due diligence before making any financial decisions. The views expressed here are our own, and they may not reflect those of our companies or partners. Investing, especially in real estate, we know lots of people who've lost lots and lots of money in get-rich-quick schemes, promised passive investments, generally with novices who didn't have the best intentions. Anyways, investing in real estate involves risk, and past performance does not guarantee future results either. Always consult your own trusted professionals. Please enjoy the show. Rodney, what's keeping you busy these days?
So much keeping me busy. We are working on a sewer heat recovery district energy system. We're working on affordable existing apartments. We got an amazing development project right at an LRT station. Springtime is paddling season, so I'm trying to paddle. I got Mother's Day weekend coming up. I still haven't bought my mom a present, so I got a full slate here.
Indeed, that's a full slate. I don't even know where to start. Actually, let's start with you. You were an environmental lawyer before. Like, tell me about that.
Yeah, it really feels like a lifetime ago, but I started my career doing public interest environmental law for an awesome organization. They're still around, called West Coast Environmental Law in Vancouver. And but I always had an interest in real estate. I just didn't know how you could get into it, but I was always kind of wandering around neighborhoods looking for the most interesting apartment buildings, or dreaming about what could be done about real estate. But I started my career as an environmental lawyer, but I was lucky. When I was working as an environmental lawyer, we got some funding on looking at legal and regulatory barriers to green buildings, green communities. And so I was meeting with everyone there was to meet with building code officials and architects and sort of saying, what are all the legal barriers to green buildings? And I got a chance to meet with this guy. His name was Harold Kalki, and he was a real pioneering eco-friendly developer in Vancouver. He built the building where the David Suzuki Foundation office was in. It was really leading with stuff like geothermal, which was unheard of at that point in time. I got a chance to go to his office, and I was supposed to have like half an hour, and I ended up spending the bulk of the day there. And he was such an incredible guy, and he was building these super cool buildings, and everyone in that office was really animated, and they had big drawings out. You could see how engaged they were, and I was like, this is way more fun than being a lawyer. I got to figure out how to get myself into that world. And anyway, so it was a bit of a road from there still in terms of going from there to becoming a developer. But I knew from that moment, it was like, boy, there's something more interesting than being a lawyer. That's for sure. Now, I use the joke all the time, public consultations and that kind of stuff. I use the joke that I started my career as a lawyer and I wasn't unpopular enough, so I became an infill developer. And I usually gets a chuckle.
Because you're in Ottawa, and yeah, like NIMBYism is a very well-known topic pretty much in all of Canada.
It's huge. Yeah, I have yet to find a development project where we go in and the neighbors say, thank goodness, I was just hoping that a developer would come next door. It doesn't happen. So yeah, NIMBY is everywhere.
That's fascinating because like you're taking properties that need help. Where would you like to start? You want to start with the church? You want to start with Zibi?
Sure. Yeah, we can talk. We can start talking about Zibi by way of background, and then we can get into some more kind of recent projects. I guess that could be interesting.
Right.
Zibi was maybe the one example where we didn't have a lot of NIMBY because there were no direct neighbors.
Okay.
But
Okay.
Zibi was an interesting one. It was an old factory site, and I'm a bike commuter, and I used to bike across this bridge called the Chaudière Bridge, and it was just a death trap. It was where all the buses and trucks went, because in Ottawa we have these what they call the ceremonial routes, where they try and keep the buses and the trucks off, and so they all end up kind of concentrated in other areas. And one of the places they end up concentrated on is this Chaudière Bridge, which was kind of narrow and went from 2 lanes down to 1 lane and no bike lanes at all. And only a narrow sidewalk even on one side. And so I would bike there all the time. And that site was an old factory, boarded up, barbed wire, but was 800 meters upriver from Parliament Hill. Had these stunning, crazy views looking right at Parliament, right on the wall. And so biking by there one day, I was like, somebody's got to do something about this. And the feds have been working on it, and different people had mentioned things over the years about, something should be done there. But I biked back and I started the conversation with my business partners to say, you know what, that site could be amazing, and it's derelict and it's contaminated and it's boarded up. Let's make a run at it. And people who've lived in Ottawa forever, I think it's been a factory site, but they kind of lose sight of it. Those kinds of things. It's just a blight that people forget about. And so they said, yeah, sure. Thinking it would never turn into anything. But I started phoning Domtar. They owned it. They were a big pulp and paper company based in Montreal. It took a while to find the right guy, but ultimately we ended up finding the right person to talk to. Ultimately, we ended up doing a deal there. And we acquired the site, we rezoned it, we created a master plan, and that master plan for that site, we won basically every award there is to win for that thing. We won awards for public consultation, we won Best Master Plan in Ontario, Best Master Plan in Canada, Best Master Plan in North America. The International Society of City and Regional Planners awarded it Best Master Plan in the globe. The year we submitted that thing. So it's still something I'm very proud of. We ended up partnering with Dream. They were really good partners, the publicly traded real estate company based out of Toronto. We ended up building a 200,000 square foot federal office building, apartments, condos. We built some really beautiful plazas, urban plazas, some park space. And one of the things we built there that's really unusual, you don't see this very often, but we built a zero carbon district energy system. So all of those buildings connect to the energy system. We've since sold our development rights in the project to Dream. We continue to own a portion of the district energy system and run that thing. But that was a great project, a big, hairy, audacious project. Made me lose most of my hair. But a fun project for sure. And if people are down in Ottawa, they should come check it out. I know you're coming to visit Irwin in a month or so. Also, Zibi's the home to the world's only interprovincial zip line. You can zip line across the Ottawa River there.
What's the website or Instagram for?
It's zibi.ca. So zibi.ca. You can go check it out. One of the other things that was really unique about that property is half the property is in Ottawa and half of the property is in Gatineau. So when I had to go do the rezoning for that, I had to go to Ottawa and I had to go to the Ville de Gatineau. And just to make things extra fun, because it's in the nation's capital, I had to go also to the National Capital Commission. So I had a good time there. It was a very complicated rezoning. Not just having to go to one city, not just even being in one province, being two provinces, two cities, and having a kind of federal oversight piece. But we were able to get zoning, and that gives you a sense that that project is rapidly getting built out.
Are there any before pictures anywhere on the website?
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't know that there are before, but what it was before was old, falling apart factory buildings, a lot of cracked asphalt and concrete, and barbed wire fences. That's really what there was some really interesting old industrial buildings that we worked to bring back to life, but by and large it was cracked asphalt and concrete and barbed wire. So yeah, that's the kind of project that makes us excited about finding an overlooked piece of land and turning it into something really special.
This is pretty special. How many square feet is this, just for folks to get an idea of scale?
Well, it's about 35 acres, and it's about 4 million square feet of development. So it's a big project, big hairy project for sure. Like I say, all with these stunning, crazy views of Parliament. That's what you're seeing. Sometimes you see these renderings where they have these views that aren't real. No, that is very much real views. We're 800 meters just upriver from Parliament Hill.
Oh, sorry, I misread this earlier. I thought it said 3.4 acre. 34 acre waterfront.
Yeah. A downtown site. You don't find sites like that very often. That's for sure.
Okay, Rodney, what does it take to get into a project like this? So I'm sure the listeners are asking, like, okay, how would one get into this?
Well,
just even just all the hoops you had to jump through.
The hoops, yeah. Big project, 2 cities, 2 provinces.
34 acres, waterfront.
Yeah, 34 acres.
Was it contaminated too previously?
Oh, wall-to-wall contaminated. Wall-to-wall contaminated.
This site easy. Turnkey.
It was such interesting history, actually. Like the first European settler in this area was a guy named Philemon Wright. And in 1799, he hired some Algonquin guides. He went up and down the Ottawa Valley trying to find where's the best place to settle. And ultimately where he thought the best place to settle in the entire region was right here, because it had these falls. And so in 1800, him and 14 families came and moved here. So in terms of the origins of the city of Ottawa, the Ville de Gatineau, obviously it's Algonquin origins first, predating settlement. But but it was Filament Right is a big part of the origin story here. And he set up a mill, and since then it's been kind of an industrial site. So there was contamination, 200 years of contamination on that site. So that's one of the things that makes us excited, is that being able to clean up that site and turn it into something really productive. There's already an amazing network of parks that we've built out there, and that it's so wonderful when I go down to the site now and you see people having a picnic along the water, or hanging out by the falls, or biking along the bike paths. It's pretty amazing to see that happening.
And so this property is both sides of the river in two different provinces.
That's
This
right.
is wild. So folks,
Yeah.
for folks listening, like I'm sharing this on my screen, zibi.ca. 34 acres on two different sides of the river. This is incredible. Okay, so how long did this take? Well, it's still going, isn't it?
It's still going. There's it's about half built out. It's going to take another decade to build the remainder out. It's got a long ways to go still. But I worked on that project for a solid decade. And so these projects don't move quickly. Development is a slow-moving train at the best of times, and these large, complicated projects take a while. But there are people that have been living down there now for 5-6 years, and like I say, apartment buildings, condos, retail space, a large federal office. They're all occupied down there and operating, along with that zip line, of course, and all tied into that zero carbon district energy system.
When my family comes to visit, can we meet here?
Yeah. Certainly drop me a note. I'd love to show you around. But like I say, there's two incredible plazas. We created these European style plazas on the site that are intended to be, places where people meet and hang out, and busker festivals happen, and all that good stuff. And so those plazas, those parks, there's the public's in them all the time. And take your family on that zip line, Erwin.
Yeah, my kids are crazy enough to do that. So this was just like an industrial area when you took it over, just like a dead, empty nothing.
A dead, empty industrial area.
Like where you shoot zombie movies.
You could have. I tell you, there was a whole warren of underground areas to old industrial areas, and I remember bringing my kids down there with flashlights and those kinds of things when we were just early days in that project. But yeah, it's a very, very unique site, very interesting site.
Are any of your current and future projects this complicated?
Well, we're kind of suckers for punishment, I think. I wouldn't. We have.
Well, if you made enough money to finance the next gigantic project.
We did all right. And but we are always looking for. There are some developers, and I tip my hat to them, because I think in many regards that maybe they're smarter than we are. That they have one kind of product, and they do that product over and over and over again, and they just look for the site. Cookie cutter. They look for the site that fulfills that, to sort of say, okay, well, we're going to do the zebra model, and we know we can just replicate that if we have these site conditions, and we're going to aim to do that 100 times. In fact, I remember years ago meeting, he used to own the San Diego Chargers, AJ Spanos, who was a famous developer, and I asked him what his secret was, and he said he built one apartment building, and it worked, and then he just refined it and kept doing it for the rest of his career. That's not us. We're always looking for kind of an innovative story. We're always looking to try and create projects that have environmental and social benefit, but there is a lot of brain damage that comes with that kind of work, for sure.
Wow. Okay, what should we talk about next?
Well, we have a couple things that have came out of Zibi. 3 things, I think, that have came out of Zibi, actually.
Yeah, because I imagine everybody loves you now. Okay, I have this crap piece of property. Can you make it beautiful?
Everyone loved us before. We're very lovable. We had a history before we got involved with doing Zibi, of creating LEED Platinum buildings and cleaning up contaminated sites for doing redevelopment. So we've been doing work rooted in similar values before then. But yeah, coming out of Zibi, there's no question. We got a lot of press coverage. As I say, we won a lot of awards. It was very high profile for us.
I imagine you met the Prime Minister, wouldn't you? Or
I
he'd been
didn't
to your
have
property at least?
I don't know whether it was Harper when we started, and then Justin Trudeau. I suspect at one point in time they would have been on site, but they didn't come meet me. But we've had lots of politicians. We've had people from around the globe tour that thing. We've had people from all different parts of Europe. We've had people from China. We've had delegations, from throughout the U.S. that have come to take a peek at that development and look at the energy system down there. But one of the things we had done when we started that project, we made a series of commitments to the community. And one of the things we said was, we don't want this to be a development that's solely for the rich. We want to make it an inclusive development. We believe that, healthy communities are diverse communities, and healthy ecosystems are diverse ecosystems. And so we said we wanted to include an affordable housing element. And we made a commitment that 7% of the project at minimum would be affordable housing. And then we figured out then we looked about how do we do that? How do we actually accomplish that? And it's not easy. It's one of the trickier pieces when you're talking about really high quality real estate, when you have to clean up a contaminated site, when you're aiming for zero carbon, when you're introducing amazing amenities and building parks, to then also have low cost affordable real estate is challenging. Now we ended up making a partnership with Ottawa Community Housing. They have some housing that's down there on site. We ended up doing a co-living project. We ended up doing a couple of rental buildings using CMHC financing that are affordable. So we ended up doing well on that front. But we realized, to create a new unit at Zibi, say, cost us about $450,000 to create a new apartment there. And we could see that in some cases, particularly in the Ottawa-Gatineau on the Quebec side, we could see that, within 800 meters of the site or within a kilometer of the site, you were seeing this older stock that was $175,000 a door. And boy, that if you're aiming to deliver on affordability, it's a lot easier to do it with that older stock than it is to do it with brand new development. And so that got us into acquiring older apartments using CMHC financing to maintain them as long-term affordable.
Sorry, Rodney, just pause you there. So you're saying to buy older property, even after renovations, 175 versus building brand new for 450,000?
That's right. Buying existing, we went out and bought a series of these older apartment buildings that they're not very sexy. You're not going to see them on the cover of Dwell or Azure magazine. They're not winning architectural awards, but they're really good quality housing.
Sorry, is there somewhere I can find pictures online?
Oh, maybe on the Thea website, theapartners.com, you might see. I should know off the top of my head about whether we have any pictures about our Green Affordable Housing Fund, but we've been acquiring these older properties, decarbonizing them, so getting them off of oil and gas, and these things tend to be energy pigs. Oftentimes they're built in the 70s or the 80s. They have an old boiler down in the basement, typically gas.
That's not bad compared to Toronto.
We've even had oil.
That's not bad. I've done most of my business in Hamilton. Our properties are way older.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. But the type, the kind of building that you go by in February, and it's maybe -10 or -15 out. And there you go. That's a picture of one of the buildings that we own. It's a picture of another one that's a little more recent. But these are the kinds of buildings that you go by, and you'll see in February that everyone's got their windows open because they think they're not paying for heat, right? Because it's included in the rent. And oftentimes the energy ceiling, the air ceiling in these buildings is absolutely terrible right there. So if you just see where it says workforce and affordable housing, oh, if you stay back there for a second, you're too quick, right? Oh,
Sorry. Yeah, workforce.
there we go. Anyway, so that's one of the things we've been doing is acquiring these older portfolios of buildings, improving the energy performance, aiming to offer a kind of more ethical alternative. Certainly, no sure. I suspect there's some of your listeners who love buying these older assets with the aspiration of turfing everyone out because they're paying low rents. And for us, we've intentionally chosen a different model where we don't mind supporting. We like supporting existing tenants, allowing them to stay there long term, but improving the energy performance and taking a really patient approach to improving net operating income and leaving those as affordable and generating a pretty consistent, low double-digit IRR back to our investors. So that's one of the things that came out of Zibi. Another project that has kind of came out of Zibi is a development project we're doing in the Westboro neighborhood of Ottawa at the Sherbourne LRT station. And they'll be scrolling that.
Sorry, light rail transit for the folks who don't know our LRT.
There we go. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I'm terrible with the jargon here. But we're building two buildings. We've partnered with a couple amazing organizations. One, a church called First Unitarian, and they had a large parcel, a 7-acre parcel. They have a real commitment to serving the community. Yeah, First Unitarian, there you go, of Ottawa. The address is 30 Cleary. So if you look at that site there, actually, if you just go to the map, they have an amazing site. It's right at the light rail transit station, which is being built currently. It's right along the river. They have this large surface parking spot, surface parking area, and they recognize that there's a housing crisis, and there's probably a lot better way to deal with that piece of real estate than letting it sit as a largely vacant parking lot. You can see from this aerial image that there's only a handful of cars sitting in that parking lot. So we're infilling that parking lot, a portion of that parking lot with two buildings, the 16-story building and the 6-story building. And the 6-story building will be owned and operated by an incredible organization called Ontario Aboriginal Housing Services. And they provide off-reserve, culturally appropriate housing for the urban Indigenous population.
Right. A not-for-profit?
They're a not-for-profit, yeah. So again, we have this kind of combination of a not-for-profit partner, a couple not-for-profit partners, and us being a market provider. And there you can see the parking lot.
Beautiful building.
It is a cool building, a real modernist fire that they have going on. So we've rezoned that property. We just got the final. We were appealed by the neighbors. We started this conversation talking about NIMBY. So we had a couple of neighbors. Oh, that's what the tower is going to look like.
It's huge.
And so we had a couple of NIMBY neighbors who weren't enthusiastic about this development and took us to the Ontario Land Tribunal. I'm happy to say we were successful. We just got word of that. And we're about to submit site plan, and we'll start construction on this project in the spring.
Sorry, Rodney, for the listeners' benefit, what kind of objections do the neighbors have? For those who aren't familiar with what this process is like, and honestly, this is partly why this is one of the many reasons why real estate is so expensive, is because neighbors block development and creation of new housing.
Big time, and it takes forever, and a rezoning is expensive to begin with, and we spent probably about $100,000 on this appeal. That
just for the appeal, $100,000.
Just for the appeal, which I would describe as our lawyer would describe it as a frivolous appeal, So in terms of opposition, it's not surprising. People who love their neighborhood, change is tough, and people don't want new development that's close to their house. There's people looking into their backyards. Our project backs onto some quite affluent neighbors. And it's not surprising that they would rather people not look into their backyards. But we're a growing country. Ottawa's a growing city. You got to put people somewhere, and this is just a great site to do it. People also have concerns about traffic. People have concerns about construction impact. There's a whole host of concerns that people have with new development. But I agree with you. We should be looking to find ways to deal with that community input in a way that's not quite as time consuming or as expensive, because it all ends up adding to the cost of new housing.
Now, for the social impact, how is this affordable housing? Like, what does that mean? Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, that's always so complicated, right? Because there's so many definitions of
Oh, there's
affordable
no good
housing
definition.
that floats out there. What I would say here, we have two buildings. I describe it as the kind of full spectrum of affordable housing. So you can just see it at the back there. That's the 6-story building, the short building near the rear of the slide. There you go. That 6-story building, that will be a nonprofit building. It'll be owned by Ontario Aboriginal Housing Services. And because they're a nonprofit, because they're able to access some grant funds that we're not able to, they're going to be able to drive to a little deeper level of affordability than we can. We're using a CMHC product called ACLP, the Apartment Construction Loan Program, which is focused on facilitating new development of rental housing, which is fantastic, much needed in this country. And the basic criteria there is that the majority of your units have to meet CMHC's definition of affordable, which is you can't have more than 30% of median household income go towards housing costs. So that's how they define affordability.
Oh boy.
Yeah, and we're able to make that work comfortably on this project. It's a great financing program. It provides 50-year amortizations. It provides very favorable loan terms over the long term. So it's something that wouldn't necessarily work in every market, but it works well for this site. This is an A+ site, views of the river, access to LRT. So this is a project we're really excited about. We can't wait to start construction on it.
And then when we first met like a month or two ago, you were sharing. Could you share a little bit what you can about the partnership with the church as well, and how they benefit from all of this?
Yeah, great, good question, Erwin. So this was a piece where the church was sitting on a large parcel of land, and
How much
the
land?
Unitarian 7 acres is their overall site.
Oh
Now
my
they've
God.
leased. Yeah, that's
7
another big.
acres?
It's another big site. Now they've leased a decent chunk of that to what's called the Unitarian House, which is a nonprofit seniors home, which sits right there. And there's also a daycare, a 1-story daycare on site. So the site's not. It sounds 7 acres sounds big, but by the time you start putting in these different pieces, it gets to be a little more of a puzzle. But so the Unitarians are different than any other church I'd ever been involved with, in that you can be a Jewish Unitarian, you can be an atheist Unitarian, you can be a Catholic Unitarian. They're very inclusive on that front. But they face some of the same challenges of a lot of different churches do, in that there's not quite as many people in on their services on a Sunday morning as there was at their peak. And there's just revenue challenges associated with it. And so effectively, we've worked out this partnership where they've vended in the land into the deal as their equity. And we have provided the funds and the expertise to get that property rezoned and ultimately to build those buildings you had pointed out earlier that you saw the renderings of. And ultimately it'll work on a revenue share. So they're able to monetize that equity. That parking lot is not currently generating any funds for them, but as we're done, once we're done that building, as they receive their share of the proceeds, it'll turn into a pretty good revenue generator for them, along with, in this case, really delivering on their social mission. So being able to deliver on affordable housing and generate a pretty nice return is really attractive for the Unitarians. And they've been amazing partners to work
Right.
with.
I imagine this is more money they've ever seen. What they're going to be making on this.
They do well by it. They do well by it. I think traditionally they've been quite a healthy congregation. So I can't speak to whether it's more than they've seen previously. But as your mouse is moving around, that's exactly where those buildings are going to sit. So
Right.
it's an awesome site and an awesome partnership. And my father was a pastor. That's so, it's funny how some of these things come back around. So I've done a couple of these church partnerships over the years, and this one's been a fun one.
And this is the way it should be, like housing, not parking lots.
Exactly, housing, yeah, not surface parking lots. Particularly, right at a light rail transit station. In this neighborhood too, you can walk to a hip little shopping district that's really not that far away. We're preserving 95% of the trees that do exist on site. So it's a really cool development project.
This is pretty cool. And
Yeah,
it just ticks so many boxes. Like it's great. It's such a win-win, except for the NIMBYs.
it is a win-win, and I've done enough development projects that typically you get into a community consultation, people lose their mind a little bit about noise, traffic, privacy, all those kinds of things. But then when it's built, people sort of say, actually, that looks okay. Actually, that one's okay, but the next one, So I have a comfort that when we're done here, that maybe it won't be as problematic to those neighbors as they think it might be. So I'm hopeful there at the end of the day that they'll see the value proposition of having some amazing new neighbors.
The neighbors who did complain, does it cost them anything to appeal? Did they have to hire a lawyer?
They would have had to hire a lawyer. Yeah,
Oh,
they would have had to hire a lawyer. They would have had to fund it. I suspect it would have been a bit painful for them. And maybe this is. I just aim to get the word out a little bit. I did sit down as we got served with the appeal. I sat down with them and said, "Listen, I don't like spending money on lawyer bills. If there's a way to make the project better and make you feel better about it, and we can negotiate something and make this go away, I'd be happy to do it. Maybe we could pay for some additional trees in your backyard or some additional landscaping or privacy screens."
Yeah.
And they said, no,
100 grand.
Yeah, they said, no, like make the buildings half as tall and move them further away, and maybe we'll talk about something. And I had told them, I said, listen, I know we're going to win this. So I'm not gonna cut the height of the building in half,
Right.
but I'm willing to entertain other measures that can really help you. And unfortunately, they weren't willing to negotiate on that basis. And so I suspect it was a little bit painful for them at the end of the day, funding that appeal to have it end up inevitably thrown out. But so I guess my small lesson for anyone who finds themselves on the other side of the fence would be, negotiate early and see what you can get out of it, because those lawyer bills are expensive for sure. To be on the losing end, it's got to be painful.
So I apologize. I don't apologize. I laugh because I've seen the same thing happen in Hamilton, where neighbors groups will basically say that, like, build less density, less height. Now, for the listeners' benefit, can you share what that means? Like what that means to, like, the investment case, the business case, to say building only half as high? It's not like you only save half the cost.
Oh yeah, I mean, certainly with development, there are a lot of fixed costs, right? So, for instance, the rezoning cost, whether we were rezoning for 30 stories or 10 stories, like that rezoning cost is the same amount. To bring in the water line, for instance, if we're building for 30 stories or 9 stories, that, the cost of the water is the same. The landscape cost. There's a lot of fixed costs, the legal costs associated with putting a deal together. Those costs are not variable costs. And so if you end up, as you sort of say, if you end up going from a 16-story to an 8-story, it's not like you cut the cost of that building in half, right? You then have to recoup those costs against a much smaller number of units. So that can really hammer affordability or hammer the returns for sure.
You still need an elevator. It's not like you
Yeah,
need less elevators.
Still need a couple of them. Yeah. Now there are always sweet spots on this too. I see no shortage of people who think, oh, if I get 30, 40, 50 stories, my returns are going to go up. But at certain thresholds, you got to add more elevators, you got to add structure. And so we think this, 16 stories for us is a real sweet spot for sure, where the returns are strong and it works well on that front. But certainly if we had to be in a scenario to negotiate that down in half, that would have been quite punitive to the returns for sure.
Now you mentioned earlier with Zibi, for example, you're building new for somewhere around 450,000 a unit, and then you were doing upgrading properties for about 175,000 a unit all in. And then how was this able to work? Or is this somewhere in between?
No, this is closer to your Zibi type costs.
Right.
And this is where you get into these definitions of affordable. So when on that older building stock, we can actually deliver rents that are significantly less than that baseline definition of CMHC affordable. The no more than 30% of median household income. We can actually be about an additional 30% less, so more affordable. Whereas for this building at the Sherbourne LRT station, we'll be much closer to that kind of baseline definition of affordable.
So where are you at? So you're close to building this now.
Well, we fully got it rezoned. We're a couple weeks away from submitting our site plan application. So we'll be kind of latter half of May when we submit that site plan application. We're just putting in our application for financing to CMHC, and we're anticipating starting construction next spring.
Are you still promoting this for, do you call it capital raising, investment opportunity?
Yeah, we're still open. We're still looking for a couple of investors to come in on that. So we like finding those kind of investors who want strong returns. We always try and aim to deliver market-based returns. So for example, on this project, we're targeting a 15% IRR.
This document's still good.
Yeah. So we always try and create strong market returns while also delivering on strong environmental and social impact. Those are the kinds of projects that really get us excited for sure. And this one ticks all the boxes, as you said, Erwin.
This is really impressive IRR on a socially I don't know what the term is. What do you call it? Like this is totally ESG friendly,
and delivers the full spectrum of affordable housing. It is, and I think in part there's a lot going for this. We have an A++ location. We got a dynamite team, but part of it is too is just the way we're able to structure this so that. We have this partnership with Ontario Aboriginal Housing, a nonprofit that's able to deliver on the deeper levels of affordability on that housing spectrum without that being a direct part of the investment hypothesis. So we're able to kind of structure it that stands on its own, and so we're fortunate in that regard. It's a really a happy collection of circumstances that allows us to deliver on that.
How is this deal structured? Is this like do you call this a private equity? Is this a limited partnership? What do you call it?
It's private equity. Typically our projects are limited partnerships, but this one's actually a corp. This one's a corporation, and there's actually quite a bit of rules, there was a lot of work to be done with CRA to make sure that the church stayed on side with CRA rules, because they are tax exempt. They're a charity. And so, and limited partnerships can be challenging on that front. So typically we're structured as a limited partnership, but this is actually structured as a corp.
Do they have to pay tax on that?
As much as you try and get away from the legal stuff, I started my career as a lawyer thinking, oh, good, I'm leaving that behind. Then you get into development and you realize that, a significant part of your life still ends up reading long legal documents. You can't get away from it.
I'm just curious if the church has to pay tax on the rental income that they're collecting.
Well, the corp will have to pay taxes, so they're a shareholder in the corp, and the corp would have to pay corp taxes. Now there's on a new rental project, there's good depreciation that helps offset that. Certainly during the early years of that project being occupied, but then on the church side, and I think their returns once it gets over to them, I would think would be tax exempt. But I'm no accountant.
Yeah.
Speak to your accountant. If you're a church, speak to your accountant.
As always, yeah, folks, we're not your accountant. Neither are we accountants. Please seek
I'm not a practicing
advice.
lawyer anymore either. None of this should be taken as legal or accounting advice. That should be the disclaimer put out here.
How did this deal come about? Was this a similar thing? You were biking around and say, "Hey, that'd be a great place to build a high rise."
No. What happened here was the First Unitarian. They had been looking around for how do we convert this surface parking lot? How do we convert it into housing? We know there's a housing crisis, and how can we create revenue doing it? And they actually hired a nonprofit consultancy. And their initial take was to sort of say, well, we want to do nonprofit housing and we want to make a return. And the consultancy sort of said, well, you got to pick a lane here a little bit. It's like saying, I want to donate to the Nature Conservancy and I want to make a double-digit return when I do it.
Yeah.
Well, you can't do both.
Right. We need this consultant to work in the government, There's just an election. I'm sure they have openings now.
There we go. Yeah, exactly. So what ended up happening was this consultancy, I knew somebody who worked there. This consultancy sort of said, well, we can't align it exactly the way you're thinking about, but maybe if we brought in a values-based market partner, maybe we could deliver on that front. And so they gave us a call, and we ended up working with them on a bit of a feasibility plan to sort of say, how could we structure this? And they had they wanted to do something that was eco-friendly. They wanted to generate some revenue. They wanted to make a tangible step towards reconciliation. And so we worked with them and this consultant to say, how could this be structured? And that's where we came up with one nonprofit building, one market building, one project. And so that it started with them giving us a call and us sitting down and working through that piece, and then ultimately turning into a development project.
That's
I'm happy
amazing.
to say
They came to you.
They came to us. Yeah. And in part just based on the reputation, like everything we do has a good impact narrative to it. We've been around for a long time. We've been fortunate enough that we're smart enough, we're prudent enough to, never went bankrupt, never lost a lawsuit, so that kind of reputation over time starts paying for itself in terms of people giving you phone calls and turning into opportunities. So this was a classic case of it.
What's in your future? Is it more projects like this, or you're just open to any sort of thing challenging?
Yeah. We do look
trails.
we do look for the complicated ones with more brain damage. We actually have a couple projects coming in the pipeline that look a little bit similar to the project I was just showing you with the First Unitarian. So we do have some projects like that are coming through the pipeline. We have one of the things we did at Zibi is we built that zero carbon district energy system. So we have a sewer heat recovery based district energy system at LeBreton Flats. So we just had a news release go out on that a couple days ago, and so we're just starting construction on that project. And so we have a couple of more of those coming down the pipeline, and we continue to buy these, older apartments, clean them up. So we stay busy, but all with a really good impact narrative.
That's exciting. I may have to introduce a friend of mine who's a former EO member in Hamilton. He's building affordable housing as well. I'm sure he'd be curious how you get your IRRs up.
I'd be ecstatic to connect with them. I love EO and I love chatting with other developers. So yeah, happy to have that connection.
He's actually building about 300 units of affordable housing. But again, I think he could use your help in getting the IRR up. It'll help him raise more capital and build more affordable housing out this way.
Well, that's one of the things that we're always kind of preoccupied about is how do we create market returns, but with that impact, because we want it to be scalable. If you're offering people returns of, 2-3%, in some cases, there's some really good people and who will do that, but it's almost charity, right? We're trying to say, how do you leverage the power of the market to really create scalable solutions? So that's always our preoccupation, trying to create those models.
Yeah, I always refer back to like the property management triangle, time, quality, and price.
Right, yeah.
Here you're trying to bring like a fourth corner to it in ESG because you usually tell people like you can only choose two. Here you're able to like improve it.
We are trying to find that balance, and it's you can't aim for perfection on any of those areas, but trying to strike that right balance for sure.
Yeah. I think again with an ESG, now it's a square. It's no longer a triangle. So I know we're running out of time. So what else? What else would you like to share? What else haven't we covered that you'd like to share with the listener?
Well, we've covered a lot of ground, Erwin. I think that's it. You touched on it. I mean, one of the things I do think is that we have a housing crisis in this country. I think it's in everyone's best interest to say, how do we make housing less expensive? And how do we make it quicker to deliver housing? That's, as a developer, it's one of the pain points I find is that there's so much friction. It takes so long to create new housing in this country. And it comes at a real premium. So that, just get that message out there a little bit, that I like to make sure that it stays on people's radars to sort of say, we gotta find a groundswell of public opinion to demand that we find ways to make housing quicker and less costly. I've been doing development now for almost 20 years, and I've seen it sort of head in one direction, ever more complex, ever longer timelines, ever more expensive, and we got to start finding how do we find ways to turn that train around and start heading in the other direction. So anyway, that's my kind of parting remarks that we didn't touch much on over the course of the interview.
You ever want to come to Hamilton? We have lots of contaminated land that wants. Contaminated water too. Waterfront land that's contaminated, both the land and the water.
Yeah, it's true. Well, you do have some. You got some interesting waterfront development that's happening in Hamilton. Oh yeah. There's some. I think Slate is doing.
Going.
Slate is doing a big project down there, I think, aren't they?
And Bayfront, and the Bayfront area, yeah. It's definitely interesting. But we still have more contaminated land and water, though, if you need it.
Maybe someday.
Oh, can we touch upon Entrepreneurs Organization? Because that's actually how we got connected. And one thing I love about Entrepreneurs Organization, and again, kind of get back to the property management triangle. Because EOs are not for profit, I find it's incredible value versus like the for-profit area around coaching and whatnot can be very expensive, sometimes double, triple the price.
I love it. I think it's great, and I got a really good group that we actually just had our monthly EO meeting on Wednesday, and I always leave those meetings with pages of notes and being inspired with what other people are doing. And if there's probably not enough developers in EO. I'd love to see more developers signed up, but it's a great organization, and being inspired by other successful entrepreneurs and being challenged by them. And one of the things we had done on Wednesday is I had shown people our latest pitch deck, and these are all really smart people, but then tearing that apart and sort of saying, I don't understand that, and that's confusing, and get rid of that finance jargon. Like, there's so much value in EO. So yeah, great organization for sure. Are you going to the conference in Montreal?
And no, I was at the one in Hawaii, so it's a little bit too much for me.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, a little bit too much time away from family and work.
I get it. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Ronnie, any final words? I think you kind of did it, but I always like to give my guests some free airtime just to say whatever you like to say.
Well, hey, I really appreciate this opportunity. People who are interested in impact investments, impact development, shoot me a line for sure. Check out theapartners.com and
how do you spell that?
Look at THEIA Partners, PARTNERS.com, theapartners.com. And hey, drop me a line when you're in Ottawa. I'll go tour you around Zibi.
Hopefully we'll run into a prime minister over there. Because come on, they've all must have been here. I know we had the last one for the last 10 years, but like other prime ministers in the future, and the current prime minister are like, I imagine will drop
suspect
by.
At one point in time or another, I suspect JT had dropped by, but yeah.
And no one got a picture of him. Like what a fantastic project.
It's a cool project. Yeah, amazing site and a cool project for sure.
Very cool. Ronnie, thanks so much for doing this. And I'll share, folks listening, I'll share links to theapartners.com and Rodney's cell phone number and whatnot. All right. Rodney, thanks again for doing this.
Thanks, Ermin. Super fun. Take care.
All right, friends, that wraps up another episode of the Truth About Real Estate Investing show for Canadians. Hope you got as much out of this one as I did. Remember that whether you're just starting out or a seasoned investor, there's always something new to learn, and it's always about building that practical knowledge base that gets you closer to financial freedom. If you found value today, please do us a favor and leave us a review or a rating, share this episode with a friend, or better yet, join our community of real estate investors who are taking action and making moves. And hey, if there's a topic you want us to cover, or there's a certain guest you'd like us to have on the show, drop me a line. My DMs are open on social media. Reply to this email that this has arrived on. I'm not hard to find. We're all about getting you the unfiltered truth to help you on your journey. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next episode. Until then, stay smart, stay curious, and keep building that future. Catch you later.